Hi FlossTube and Instagram friends and anyone else watching. I'm Susan Stanley and this is Susan Stanley Stitch in Time. On my channel I like to talk about cross stitch, quilting, textiles from the 1800s, sewing notions, and anything else of interest that happened or relates to my curiosities in the 1800s. So Welcome and thank you for those of you who are new. I have a few new subscribers. Thanks to Miss Becca of Sambry Stitches who interviewed me, and welcome to you and thank you so much for joining on my textile stitching journey with me. I really appreciate it. I do this because I love it, but it's really fun to share it with anybody else who finds it of interest and loves it too. So I can't thank Becca enough. Since that interview, got to drive down to Portland with Becca, which I'll talk about on another episode. It was just an epic day. It was so fun. When you're locked in a car with somebody, you really get to know them, and we just had a blast. So if you have not already signed up for Becca's channel, you need to go check her out. Becca of Sambry Stitches. She lives in Bremerton, which is, not too far from me. So it's really fun to meet other people in the area who stitch. Becca has recently become a designer, so I would encourage you to check out her new designs. I actually purchased her cross stitch chart that she drafted in honor of her grand kitty who was having some health issues. Now we don't have a kitty at the moment, but kitty cats are very special in our family, and I will be stitching this at some point for my husband somehow, because in spite of the fact that I'm the one that cares for all the animals in the home, they just always love him. He's always their favorite. So anyway, check out Becca, support a new designer. There's a couple of other people who have started designing, and kudos, cheers to them. It's a big step, and I'm so proud of her. I'm so excited for her. I hope she does really well. So please check her out. Thank you so much for the love. Last month I was dealing with a lot of personal stuff, a lot of life issues, and the love and support and just encouragement, and especially, people have been through losing a parent, people have had issues with their vision. Everyone just was so kind and compassionate and encouraging. The sun comes up, it's a new day, and we just keep going, but I thank you for that love and support. It's meant so very much. The personal messages, I had cards from people. It's just I just can't really, it's hard to put it into words when people that you've never met face to face show their love and care, and this community is really amazing with doing that. So thank you so much. I also had a lot of really kind comments about my hem stitch tutorial, which it was my first attempt at trying to show something, and it was encouraged by so many of you who wanted to see it. So I felt like I was just showing a friend a process, and if I ever do, I have ideas on how to improve in my tutorial if I ever do another one in the future on other things. And people have requested some quilting tutorials, and we'll see what I can pull together. But thank you, and I do appreciate, I would love to see if anyone uses that to hem stitch an item. I would love to see the results. If there's further questions, my email is in my contact information on my YouTube channel. Please email me or message me. I don't really understand how the comments work on YouTube and FlossTube. Sometimes they get lost. I try to go into my channel and scroll through to see if there's some that I haven't answered. I really try to respond to everybody. I love I love that interaction, so I don't want to lose that personal touch. So having said that, if you have questions, suggestions, I know there's so many ways to hem stitch, and that was just one very simple way. And anyway, let me know what you think. I do have the idea of a quilt block exchange rolling around, and I've had some of you reach out with ideas of how to do it. I know when I've done block exchanges, and well, let me first say this. When I finally launch it, it's going to be a very simple block. And the challenge with quilt block exchanges is everybody's sewing is a little bit different. And everybody's taste in fabric is a little different. So I think I have ideas on how to make that successful for everybody, and also find ways to swap fabrics that you desire to have in your quilt. So we'll try it. If it's a go, it's a go, and maybe more will come out of it. We'll see. But I'm still cooking that up, and I will share that more with you next time. I also am considering putting a book list together, because throughout my videos I've shared several books. Throughout my videos, you all have shared amazing book lists, and I think it would be really nice to have those in one place. They will be cross stitch, they would be quilting, and they would also just be textile history and possibly antique notions, because I'm getting a nice collection of all those in all those categories. So let me know if you think that's something that is worth me putting my time into, and adding to my information on my channel. All right, so this is going to be a really special episode. This introductory part is a very small part of the episode. I have something exciting for you. So I hope you think so. So what have I been up to? Well, mostly I've been stitching on my Dutch Beauty. There are so many of you stitching it, and it's actually called A Dutch Beauty. I was calling it the Dutch Beauty. It's called A Dutch Beauty. And I decided, because it was spring and Easter, that I needed to move into the section with the bunny. And so I'm using the called for DMC. So I had to work on little bunny down there. So I'm trying to do a page a month. So I'm going to do the page below the top right hand corner. I believe it's page M. Let's see. It's soft, it's pretty. I'm stitching at 1/2 on 36 count Mayflower by Fox and Rabbit. It's my go-to comfort stitch. I don't know why it's such a huge piece of fabric, why I find this comforting, but I don't know. I just really like it. It's forgiving. If you make a little, like the arch and the tree both have little mistakes, and they don't show at all, so I left them. So I can't help, because of, what I love to do is make connections between cross stitch and textiles and whatever was going on. Why? I'm always asking why. So this sampler was stitched by a 13-year-old young woman in 1790 in the Netherlands. So it made me think about some of my other Dutch samplers, and I am definitely not an expert in Dutch samplers, not even close, but I want to learn. And so as I learn, I would love to share with you what I find out. So I want to show you a few other Dutch sampler charts that I have in my collection. And from around the 1700s. I'm very curious because I have loved a fabric, a Dutch fabric, from around that same time period. And I'm just curious, I was curious, have been curious, and have been looking into any connection between these samplers and the motifs and the fabric that I'm going to talk about. Anyway, so another sampler in my, let me take this out, from that time period is this one by Liz Matthews. I bought this last year at market and I have not stitched it yet. Do any of you ever do that? You buy it and then a year later you still haven't stitched it? I loved it. I loved all the pin cushions, all the pin pillows. This is from 1839. So it's a tiny bit later than the time period that I was curious about. The time period I'm really curious about, because the fabric, is the 1600s up to about the early 1800s. So you see a lot of baskets with flowers. These motifs are not, and then you've got the peacocks or roosters down there. Here. Okay, so that's one of them. And there are tons of those same motifs on Dutch Beauty. They're just larger. We've got a peony or a rose, and then the tulip, and then these flower pots up here. The next one I pulled out is brand new. Well, actually a couple of these are brand new. I got this at this year's market, GH 1857. Now this is a tiny bit later than the fabric that I'm interested in talking about, but it has some of those similar motifs, those gorgeous pots, and then it's got the house. This pot down here looks a lot like the one in A Dutch Beauty. Beautiful book. If you didn't get this, oh, this is almost exactly like a flower pot in A Dutch Beauty. Beautiful. And the colors are soft and subtle. This one is particularly interesting to me, and I know there's another one called the Deventure Duo, and I don't have that chart, but I'd love to kind of compare and maybe, but I was particularly interested in this vase right here, which has some motifs from China, from the country China, and it looks like pottery from that country, and then of course the flowers and the vases. And this is 1806, so this is closer to the time of the fabric that I'm interested in. Then how could I not get this one that just came out from Jacob of Modern Folk Embroidery? Now I'm sure he could tell us so much, and he has. I'm sure you're all subscribed to his channel, but if you're not, you need to. Modern Folk Embroidery. He found this. You have to look at his channel and learn the story about how he found this sampler. And so this deer, these spies of Canaan, and the vases are in Dutch Beauty. This orange tree is in Dutch Beauty. I mean, a lot of these motifs are similar. And then we have a Kathy Barrick sampler, Dutch sampler. I also bought this last year at market. Now this one has some of that blue and white here, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then the beautiful flower vases. The pelican, which has significance. One thing I really appreciate about Jacob's chart and A Dutch Beauty is the motifs the meaning is described, and I find that fascinating. So this one's gorgeous. And I don't think there's a date on that one. Make sure I get that back in the right spot. And have I stitched these, you ask? Not in completion. So I have a lot of work to do, a lot of stitching to do, but it's all fun. All right, and then the last one is the Dutch Birds sampler. And again, you see, in this one, what's the date on this? Let's see, I should have looked that up. This one is another Modern Folk embroidery chart. And of course, they're beautiful. Okay, so this one's Northern Holland, Northern Netherlands. A lot of similar motifs. So why am I showing you these? Well, of course, I love Dutch samplers. I do have an ancestor who was from the Netherlands, and so, you know, I'm interested, but I also just think the charts are gorgeous. But I wanted to see if there was a connection between the charts, the samplers that were being stitched in this time period, and the fabric that was really coming into its heyday, and that's chintz. And if you don't know what chintz is, you're about to find out. It's a gorgeous fabric, and because I love to tie things together, I reached out to Katherine Adrian of Stitching and Costume. She has reproduced so many gorgeous outfits from different time periods and used so many different fabulous fabrics. I wondered if she had ever made or designed a costume in chintz. And so we've had some really great conversations, and I'm going to pop in our chat where we talked about chintz and the clothing that was being worn during that time period, and the motifs that were being stitched on these Dutch samplers, and see if we could pull any connections together. And if nothing else, we would just be interested or be able to show each other and you some of the things that were going on in the Netherlands during the time of these samplers being stitched. Now, this is a very cursory, simple discussion of these things because I'm just dipping my toe in the water. You know, there are books, volumes written on all these topics, but it's eye candy, it's fun, it's inspiring, and might bring a little interest and connection to whatever you're stitching if you decide to stitch one of these samplers someday. So let's go take a look at that discussion with Katherine.
Got it. Let me do that. Okay.
Okay, I think we're set.
Yeah.
All right, so we're here with Katherine Adrian of Stitching and Costume, and I have followed her from the beginning of her channel, and I just love the connection that we have because we both love stitching, but we both love fabric, and we both love history and historical fabric. I like to play with quilts, and she loves to make fabulous costumes. So I thought, let me reach out to Katherine and see what she can participate, how she can add to this discussion. And so if anybody hasn't watched her channel, you definitely need to go watch Katherine. But Katherine, tell us a little bit about how you got into the costuming.
Yes. Well, hi, Susan.
Hi.
Well, let's see. I got into costuming. I've always been in theater, for a really long time. And I worked, in professional theater. I worked for Disney. I did all of that stuff, and I talk about that on my channel. But how I got into making costumes was our daughter was really into, back in the days when Marie Antoinette, the movie, came out with Kirsten Dunst. Our daughter's a real tomboy, and she said, I want one of those dresses. And I said, oh, I can make one of those dresses. And I always sewed and, did things like that. But I had never really, and I'd made, their kids' costumes, but I'd never really made, a historical dress. So I started, and this was back in, I think, the early 2000s. And so I started to really do that deep dive into historical costuming. And I kind of Frankenstein patterns together, like Butterick and McCall's and things like that, put them together and figured out how to make this little dress for her. But it led me down into these blogs where people, and that's how we, got information back in the day. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have a lot of the stuff that we have now, all of the sites and everything. So I started to read people's blogs on historical costuming. I got really deep into it just for myself, and started to build costumes, and I sold a lot of them. And then I joined a guild in the Bay Area, the Greater Bay Area Costume Guild, and we would have costumed events. So you would make, like, the last dinner on the Titanic, you'd make your Titanic gown, and my husband would go in his tuxedo, and it was like a recreation of that last event. And then, dinner with Marie Antoinette at the Petit Trianon, and so all in the silks and the French and the hats and the big hair and things like that. Anyway, so yeah, I was very into that. And that's kind of how I got into doing embroidery again, because I wanted the embroidered stomachers, but I got a machine that would do embroidery, but I didn't like. It was like, no, it's missing something. It needs to be touched by hands. So that's how I started to do gold work and stump work and things like that. And I started to embroider, and then started cross stitching because I was listening to Fiber Talk, and it kind of, I was like, floss tube, what? I need some floss tubes, thinking it was an organization system. So anyway, now I'm so into the historical aspect of stitching with all the samplers and things like that. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. When it comes to costuming, I haven't really picked up the costuming end of it since we did our big move, about 3 years ago. So my costumes are kind of all up in my attic until you said, hey, do a thing. And so here I am in my costume. This is a little 18th century costume, and that's my real love, is the 18th century. I'm not like an expert by any means, or I didn't study, textiles or anything like that. It's just really a fascination for me. And I do a lot of deep diving into that 18th century. So
I think so, and I already said in the previous clip before this that I don't think either of us claim to be experts. We're just curious, and we like to ask questions, and we wanted to share just our interests, right? So I got this crazy idea when I was stitching the Dutch Beauty sampler and looking at all the other Dutch sampler charts that I have, and I thought, I love Dutch chintz, which is the type of fabric we're going to talk about. And I wondered if what you knew about it and what you knew about the costume and the style of dress during that time period. Actually, 1600 to 1800 is kind of when a lot of these samplers were charted and stitched.
Yeah.
And the Dutch chintz kind of came into its own during that time. But prior to chintz coming to Europe, it was in India. Is that right? It started in India. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the history of this fabric, and then we can show some samples.
Yeah, well, from now until you had asked me to talk about this, I hadn't really known a lot about chintz. A lot of the reproductions I do are silks, but I thought, okay, well, let me find out about it. So boy, did I deep dive into it, and it is so fascinating. The history of chintz, of course, it was so popular all over the world, and it really, I'm going to try to stay focused, but it lit up the whole cotton trade, all over the world. And it created this, this real enthusiasm for the Indian chintzes that were handmade, right? Did you already talk about,
No, I didn't. I actually I have a picture here of an antique piece of Indian fabric, and that's all hand block printed. So is that's what you're referring to?
It's well, and from what I found out about it, so the Indian trade, so they started, it was the Portuguese explorers that went over in the 1600s, right, to or earlier, to start to trading spices, and the chintz was an afterthought. They brought it back thinking, oh well, they didn't have the spices that we want, well, we'll bring this fabric back and see if anybody wants that, and it just took off. And so then they started to go over for that specifically, the Indian chintz. So the way that they did it, so they have their cotton, and then they have a mordant, which they actually hand painted a lot of the design on, and then the cotton, the whole piece of fabric would get put in a dye. So let's say they do the red first on the flower. So they've got the red highlights of the flower. They put that in the dye, and the mordant would take the red dye. They'd pull it out, they'd bleach it, so only the red was left, and now they're going to paint blue. Then they do the same thing all the way through green and yellow, and or I'm sorry, just the yellow and blue. So yellow and blue made the green, but that was the most rare. The yellow was more fragile and faded more. Anyway, so there's a real distinction between block printing and the Indian way of hand painting everything. So the block printing came later, and that was more of the European process, from what I understand, right? So that was their way to deal with, okay, well, we don't want to wait for 2 years to get our fabric, because that's how long it would take, right? So fashions are changing by then. Right. So they start off early in the century, the chintz was a bigger block. So what we think of as chintz is probably grandma's curtains, right? So the bigger, cabbage roses and things like that, of all these different colors. But so it started with the bigger prints, and then it shifted. So towards the end of the 18th century, it went to the smaller block prints. And this is just a piece of this is a French general quilting cotton. So it's not a chintz, but it's very similar to what you would see in the chintz designs. So the things that were made, okay, so for the European market, so they would bring this fabric back, and jackets for women, the short jackets, and I'm going to stand up and show you, this is not a chintz jacket, but this is in the style of what they would have, a short jacket with a little bit of a peplum. And there were other styles, very low cut, but they would have these pieces that I'm going to talk about that they would put underneath it. Now, I've got this is more of a fichu type, so this is more of the European, but the Dutch particularly loved what they called a partlet. So I'm going to pull up a picture. I'm going to try to show you on my iPad some of the things that I've been kind of looking at. So this is a Dutch costume. I don't know if you can see. Let me know if you can tell. So you can see it's got like ladders and that type of thing. So underneath it is where you would see a different type of chintz. And so they would wear these small, how did you describe it? Kind of like, I want to say, let's see, back in the 60s, we had Dickies, right? Or people wore those. So it's a little piece of fabric. You can kind of see them on the wall of that museum.
Okay, so it's your shoulders and then just your neckline and just like part of a top. Yeah,
correct. It's just a piece of fabric that goes across and it ties underneath your arms and it gets held in place. Here's another one. It's held in place. I don't know. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, and so that it's interesting because they're talking about that is something that you would wear underneath your very low cut bodice, and so you would have like all these layers of different chintzes, and some people think that the skirts were all also done in chintz. Now, some people think, or some of the research people that I found talking about this is the jackets were chintz, but very often the skirts were a damask, something a little quieter so that your chintz would show, or it would be vice versa. There's so many petticoats, the skirts that were made of chintz as well. Oh, wait, there was one in here that I found. I don't know if this is going to read. Well, it's kind of, let's see if I can get that up there. So again, you've got that really smaller print. So that's probably later in the century.
So that was actually hidden under the, was that the petticoat hidden under the damask or the outer skirt?
Yes, they did wear layers of petticoats. So that could be something that as you're moving, your skirt peeks up and you can see just a little bit of chintz underneath. So that's a possibility as well. Some people think that they actually they mixed them, and that they wore like this is a blue chintz on top and a different chintz on the bottom. No, that's reading.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So
that chintz on the top, I'm just going to show because some of those have been reproduced, and this looks a lot like.
It looks a lot like that.
Of Dutch heritage chintz. This is reproduced by Petra Prins, and you can get this now. But yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
and it has a glaze to it. The fabric itself.
Right. And I'm not sure if they still do it, but I think back when in the early 18th century, 17th century, I think the sheen came from pressure and heat, and not so much of a glazy thing on top, because it would stay. That was the thing about chintz. It was so hardy, it was so strong that they could wash it, because very often the silks, the velvets, you're not going to go wash those. You'll brush your velvet off. You might spot touch up your silk, but you're not going to immerse it in water very often. And so let's talk just a little bit. So who had the chintz? Who brought the chintz over? So it started as wall hangings, bed covers. Now I noticed that you have something behind you that you wanted to talk about, and that is a wall hanging, correct? Or is it?
It was used on bed covers, but it's this is actually the Indian design. It had not been changed. This was more in tune with the original Indian motifs. Because as Europeans were buying and trading, they were actually requesting motifs be changed. Of course, in Holland or the Netherlands, they wanted the tulip, but across Europe, they wanted floral motifs.
Yes.
They weren't as interested in this, but this is called a palanquin panel, and it was really popular for bed coverings and window coverings and things. You wouldn't make a dress out of that.
Correct, right. And I think what they brought it over for initially was that's what chintz was for. It was to decorate the home of the uber wealthy. These people had so much money, right? And what happened was eventually they said, well, listen, I'd like to start wearing it. And the way they wanted to wear it was for more of a casual wear. Now, when I say lounge wear in the 18th century, late 17th, it was not like we would sit around in sweats or something. It was what they called banyans for the men. And these are long robes that look, they're at-home wear. And they would still entertain people at their parties and such. Let me see if I can get this picture up. But it was very influenced by Japanese style. Can you see at all?
Tilt it a little bit It's almost like a smoking jacket.
You know, exactly. It goes all the way to the floor. Let me see if that one's.
And it was for gentlemen. Okay, yeah.
Oops, sorry. Yeah. Let me see.
Oh yeah.
So you can see how beautiful. And so that was their house coat, right, Rachel from Needle and Flax?
I know. I was going to say that.
You know, I'm all into that. I think I should recreate one of those. So, and the women had something similar that was also a long coat. But so they would sit around in their loungewear and they would do that. It started to cross over into daywear, but for the women specifically, not so much. I mean, the men, the wealthy, you know, men didn't wear chintz waistcoats or it was that kind of moved down into the middle and lower classes would have that because it replicated silk. It looked like silk, but the really wealthy people could buy silk. So that was their more evening wear. And I'm talking specifically Europe, right? So now the middle classes, they loved the chintz and that's where it really, you know, that was your Sunday wear. You would wear your chintz and you try to have the best looking chintz that you could on Sundays. But so yes, you have banyans, that's what the men would wear. They also had things called powder cloaks. So they're small capes, right? So now you can't see it. My hair is all puffed up and I have, you know, a hot mess going on underneath this, but they would have these big hairstyles. So they would put these cloaks on at the end, you know, they would be completely dressed, the cloaks on, and the last thing they would do was powder the hair. So to protect their clothing, they had these capes that would go over the top of their clothing. And so that was another accessory that they had. They also had these crazy sun hats. Let me see if I can pull one up. Okay, so they have, okay, you can see, I don't know if you can see how big that hat is. It's almost like you're wearing an umbrella on your head. Really? Your parasol is attached. Now what they would do is on the lining of that, oh, here's a good one. So you can see the chintz lining next to it, and that is the outfit. So they would wear these big hats and the chintz lining would be underneath the hat peeking out. So yeah, that was definitely another thing, in caps and oh yeah, it's just such an amazing textile.
Was that the fashion in the Netherlands, or is that all across Europe?
That is the Netherlands. That is specifically the Netherlands, those big sun hats, and they, you know, they loved red chintz. The red is their, you know, I think that's still their folk dressing when you see the national costume in the Netherlands. I believe that red chintz is still something they still wear. And the partlets have actually transitioned to being from the inside to being outside the costume. And they've gotten, the fashion gets exaggerated. They're even bigger now than they were before. So they're, and they actually use 18th century fabric. And so there's a little, yeah, it's, can you imagine cutting up an 18th century petticoat to make a partlet? But they do that to represent, you know, their folk costume. And so there's a school of thought that it sounds horrifying, you know, on one hand, but on the other hand, it's not for like a one-time art project. This is something that they treasure and wear and exhibit very often, you know,
so this really became what I found interesting as we were reading together and researching this, that the Dutch went to India and as part of the Dutch trade company brought the fabric over, and then they kind of adopted it. It has become a part of their national identity, and a lot of regional costume is in the Dutch chintz. So it became very beloved to that country in particular. And they, there was a time, and I think we talked about this before, that chintz became outlawed in most of Europe except for the Netherlands, because it was so popular. It was cutting into the industry of those countries. And so the Dutch were actually smuggling into France and England and Germany and whatnot. And so it's like, wow, you know, this fabric became forbidden because it was cutting into the economy.
Right. Oh
Crazy.
yeah, that was such a huge controversy. And but you know, though, it's funny that when you say that is they still wore it. You know, there were still the higher you know, upper echelons, they still wore the chintz, you know. So yes, it was outlawed, but it was still something that people wore. Yeah, that whole aspect of it was just you know, yeah, without delving too much into, you know, what happened, you know, with the economy in India, how yeah, that it was outlawed. I think it was until like 1780, I think, and then it started, it was okay again. But yeah, that's when the European market started to take over and try to do their own chintz.
Right.
So they didn't have the same techniques because they did block printing. And there was a huge difference between the Indian chintz and the European chintz. And so what they would do is they'd kind of Frankenstein these jackets together. When I was doing research, they have some examples of chintz that was a jacket that had the underside of it would be in the European chintz, and the sleeves, the part that you would actually see, would be in the real chintz, the Indian chintz. Let me see if I can pull this jacket up. Oh yeah, that's a perfect example if you can see that.
Oh yeah, yep.
So the part that you'd see was the beautiful red Indian chintz, and you can see the different, you know, it's totally different. So even though they were, you know, doing their block prints and they were beautiful, there was still a big distinction, and you could tell who's got the real chintz and who doesn't have the real chintz. So yeah, that whole aspect of it was really interesting to me.
So interesting. And so I guess nothing was wasted. If something was, maybe you outgrew your outfit, you know, you would use that fabric then to make a child's outfit or something.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of the paintings that we see now that have chintz in them are of children. And I think it wasn't that chintz was for children specifically. I think it's like, it was so valuable. And so if the fashions change, as they did, they still do, you wouldn't just throw out that chintz, you'd reuse it. So they would restyle it into the current fashion. And then, you know, when that didn't work out, they would cut it up. It would get put into baby clothing, into children's clothing. And when you think about how quickly children outgrow clothing, that would get stored away, right? Because it's so small to begin with. I mean, it came from mom, went to the kids, and now it's, you know, they're outgrown. And so let's tuck it away. And so I think a lot of the things that are surviving that are in museum in good condition are the children's clothing. But yeah, they would hold on to it. It was valuable. And they would remake it, you know, as you know, textiles then weren't something that, like I said, it took 2 years to get that chintz.
That's right.
You'd say, I want that red print, and you'd send your order in. It would go across the ocean. They would do what they did. They would bring it back. You know, it took a long time to get things. So it was very treasured.
And the skill and technology in India was 200 years, you know, it was been well established for hundreds of years before it came to Europe, and Europeans didn't know how to remake it. And they were able to get these vibrant colors in India and have them be steadfast and not wash out. I'll just show this really quickly. This woman, her name is Petra Prinz. She and Anne Moonen are Dutch, and they have reproduced a lot of antique quilts. But you can just see these are reproduction fabrics, but the vibrant colors of those fabrics from that time period. We think that, you know, it was white background or a light background, but they loved the color and the vibrancy. And a lot of the pieces, I'm assuming the pieces got cut up into little quilts after they were completely unusable.
Oh,
So
right.
all the quilts that survived, you know, so this stuff didn't just get thrown away. It was, like you said, savored, and wouldn't we love to get our hands on some of it?
Oh gosh, wouldn't we? I mean, after I started to research on that, well, you know, I should do like a chintz, a little chintz jacket, you know, and I'm not giving up on that, but I started to go, okay, well, where can I get some chintz? Well, you can't just go on eBay and buy chintz. It's like,
No.
you've got to source it. There's like 2 companies that reproduce it. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
So it's like I need to really know what the heck I'm doing before I start to pick it up and do it. But yeah, it's absolutely, it's just so beautiful, the colors, and the history is so rich, you know.
And so each country in Europe kind of took it. I mean, the Netherlands kind of started with it, and they adapted the motifs, the animals and things from India maybe weren't as desired in farther reaches of Europe. Although I have to show you something. I found this really interesting. This is a book by some researchers of textiles, mainly quilts, Lori Lee Triplett. And they, in the beginning of the book, they have a picture of some Indian fabric. And do you see that little monkey in the tree?
Yes.
So I've always wondered why on this Dutch beauty sampler, this monkey is supposed to be pulling the thread of time, like the threads of time, like someone controlling someone's life. Okay. And I just wondered, you know, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I would love to find out, you know, how some of these motifs came from the fabric to be in samplers. Was there a connection, or were they just completely separate? I don't know, but I find
no, I mean, you know, that's a really fascinating point. And, you know, Dutch beauty, I have that chart. I kitted it up. I was going to start it, and then I was like, okay, calm down. You know, I have to say your progress on that chart is amazing, what you've done so far. But yeah, I think the motifs in it are
it's pretty.
Motifs are so fascinating in it.
It's like, you know, when I see your Anne Uffendale, I want to start it, but then I think, okay, get real, Susan. You know, it's going to take 1.5 years probably for me to do. So.
I know. I mean, you know, I have like, I want to finish Anne by my birthday, and I feel like cross stitch is my job right now. I'm like, yes, I can, but I'm enjoying it, and it's all going to be fun.
Enjoy it.
But yeah, I mean, back to the Dutch beauty motifs. I mean, let's see. So Dutch beauty, that was a chart from mid-17.
Yeah, it's 1790.
Oh, so it's towards the end. But you know, she probably started it before that, right? That was something that took time.
She was 13.
So I mean,
yeah. I mean, how long do you think it took her?
Well, that is a great question. You know, at the motif up in the corner of the woman with the weird arm. Okay, so what do you know what anything about that? That feels like that, you know, this was the golden age.
That's what it's called.
This is when for the Netherlands. So this was when the Republic was founded. So I have a feeling that is what that motif is. But
you know what's great about this chart, and I have to say about this chart, I did download Jacob embroidery. I mean, will I have time to stitch this? I mean, wouldn't these be great together?
It would be perfect.
They both have so much history. I mean, he tells the whole story of the founding of the Republic in this, and then in here, in several languages, it tells you the meaning. And I believe that is the Dutch Virgin. in the Dutch garden, and she's holding a stick and a hat and waving a ribbon, and she's the symbol of freedom.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you're right. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So that's a huge, so I mean, all of these things, they feel like they're detached, but I'm sure they all have their own cohesive story that she was telling. That's what I love about the samplers, right?
Yeah.
Is the stories. But
so likely this little girl, you know, was seeing chintz, possibly. I mean, I'm assuming she was not, she had money. I'm sure this little girl came from wealth or some kind of established economy, and she was likely seeing chintz. Now it's not represented in the outfit, but anyway, I just, you know, I can't help but be curious about these, you know, these things. And now you were telling me a little bit about color, like red had a significance.
Yes. Okay. So what I thought was interesting was the mourning color, the grieving color.
Okay.
It was a dark ground. I don't have any examples, but it was almost like a brown black ground of the chintz, and then it would still have floral. Also blue and white, which you'd think blue and white, you know, I'm wearing blue and white, but that was also a color for mourning for them, for the Netherlands.
That is so interesting, because I pulled out a couple charts, because I know that the blue and white pottery was the Delft pottery. And so that's represented in a couple of these charts. Now this one is in more of an Asian, like a Chinese influence. I don't know if you can tell, but yeah, I wondered, so that was mourning colors. Interesting.
Mourning colors, and then like the wedding color would be like a red and white. And they call that, blood and milk. I mean, it sounds so visceral, right?
You're very earthy, very earthy.
Very, very earthy. But yeah, so the different colors do have different meanings. And, you know, well, that went all throughout Europe, right? So, I mean, the Netherlands really in the 1600s and the 17th century, right? They were all in black for the most part. And it really wasn't until the end of that century that they started to bring in the color and the chintz. I have this picture. Let me see if I can pull it up. And this is a Dutch Netherlands painting, and it is the father. I don't know if it's going to read. The father and the mother in black.
Well, you bring it up just a tiny bit so you can see the young girl is wearing
chintz.
Look at that.
And so that was
wallpaper. The wallpaper looks like it's chintz as well.
The wallpaper was chintz. Let me see if I can pull up this doll. Oh yeah, this dollhouse from that era is all decorated in chintz as well.
Oh my goodness.
And you can see the wallpaper. Look at that. It's just amazing.
That's a whole other rabbit hole. Oh my goodness. So neat.
Cool. But yeah, I mean, that's really, it was covering everything, you know, the walls, the beds, everything was covered in chintz, and then it migrated into clothing.
So I know, you know, growing up, we always thought large scale cabbage roses, that was, you know, we associated that as chintz, but now that I know, it's really more the process of making the fabric, right?
Right. That's exactly right. And it, chintz, I can't remember, chintz, I think is what it started as, and it's the process and not the print.
And it's actually an a Hindi word. Yeah, it is actually, the word chintz is, I can't pronounce it in Hindi, but it's similar, very similar, and it's been, you know, westernized. But yeah, just so interesting. So now really looking at those other fabrics that I always thought were chintz, I would say, well, those are more like large scale florals, but I think they're chintz in our, you know, in our culture, in our world.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, the word chintzy, I think we talked about that a little bit. That came from, do I have it? I don't have my paper with me, but it's it was actually an author that described the chintz as there was a print that she was seeing on someone's clothing, and it said it was chintzy, so meaning that it wasn't quite the quality of what a real chintz was. And so that kind of that phrase kind of lit up and took on its own little velocity, and so we still use that word chintzy for something that's not quite, it's not quite right. It's not maybe the quality of what you would hope to see, right? Fabric's chintzy. Well,
exactly.
It just means that it's not as good.
Yeah. So isn't it, I mean, it all ties together, language and everything. It's just incredible. Well, I sure appreciate you doing this with me. Did we get to see your full outfit?
Did you see the whole outfit?
We need a little more.
Let me see if I can walk back and show you. I even wore shoes today.
Oh, wow. Oh, it's so adorable. You're just amazing.
And then my shoes, I have the worst socks on, but you can see my little red shoes I've got on with the buckles. They're the American Duchess shoes. Want me to pull one up? Let me see if I can get it off.
Yes.
They're 18th century. I have a couple of her, American Duchess is a shoe reproducer of all different eras. You can see the red shoe. It kind of looks like that pin cushion I got.
They're darling. They're just darling. Are they comfortable?
They are. They're really comfortable. Really? They're pretty low. So yeah, these are really good. They're super comfy.
And you know what? Did we talk about your hat that you're wearing?
So the hat is it's a linen. It's an 18th century pattern that I found that it's all hand stitched for the most part, and it's very poofy, so it's got a lot of stuff in there to keep it up. It's supposed to kind of perch, I think, on your head. And you can also, I worn a hat over the top of this, so I have a little sun hat, and outside wear that. So you probably know this, were hats kind of regional? It seems like not everybody wore the same hat everywhere. Yes, I feel that this type of hat would be more in the European area, whereas I think in the Americas it was lower, like you were saying, a mob cap. That's something that we would think of as colonial, American colonial. This is more what I would think of as English. It's linen. So I think the English trade was very linen centric, and cotton was something that was very hard to get. And so very focused on linen. And then in France, you would find something more in, silks in that part of the world, but brocades, silks, things like that. But yeah, I would say this is more of an English look. And my sleeves are also detachable. So these are just linen sleeves that I can take off and launder because, they're light, and I don't want to immerse, it's got boning in it and all of that. I can dry clean it. It's got a linen lining, this jacket, and it also is flat lined with a silk organza to give it more of that, smooth look to it. And then you can see
just amazing
linen underneath. So
how long do you remember how long that took you to put together?
Oh gosh. I mean, these costumes are kind of epic. It depends on what it is and how much trim. I do all my outside trim by hand, which is typical, because anything you are going to be seeing, historically, you don't want to see machine stitching or trim from Joann's or, something like that. So I do a lot of that. So I mean, the big Francais, with the pleats in the back, that kind of gown with, the panier and all of that, that probably took probably 60 hours. You know, it was a really long time. This one, you know, it's hard to say, you know, it's a journey. You know how when you're stitching, you're not really thinking about time. Like you sit at your kitchen table and you just kind of, even if you're just holding your fabric and you feel comforted. That's kind of what I just kind of, you know, do it as I go along. And it's just, that's why I like this kind of sewing. I'm not really the type of person that loves to sew for theater. I have done it before. It's more about get the fabric on the body and get the body on stage as you know, quickly and cheaply as you can. I like to really research what I'm doing and build it from the inside out. So I have a corset or stays, bodies that are all fully boned. I've got panniers, different ones that, you know, can go very wide, or these are just my little hoops. Let me show it to you. I don't have a petticoat on, but I'm going to show you these little hoops. So these just have a boned cage kind of, and it has a place where I could have a pocket. I don't have my pocket on, but this is my pocket that I made, and that would normally go underneath your clothing, ironically, but you know, this one's kind of ornate. I just kind of wanted to make something that looked more, you know, it's kind of like crewel work.
It's gorgeous.
On linen. There's some padded like stump work, things like that, my dogs, but the pocket would go underneath, and that would be a place for you to keep things like, you know, powders, patch boxes. So like the little boxes, the patches that they would put on their faces in different shapes and in different places would mean different things. Maybe a fan, depending on how big, you know, your pocket was. Pins to pin your clothing in, because they didn't have, well, they did have hooks and eyes, but very often it was pinned, you know, pinned closed. Or pinned, the stomacher would get pinned to the corset, and then that would get pinned to the dress. So yeah, all that.
And,
I don't know.
And pins were valuable. Pins were not like, they were valuable, right?
Very valuable. You would hold on to those pins, right? You know, and that phrase "pin money," that was probably what that meant. You know, this is money that I need to buy my pins so that I can put my clothing together. Yeah, I was watching some. It was about Tudor history, and they were talking about Queen Elizabeth the First and how many pins she bought. It was like 4,000 pins, you know, a year is what she went through. And they find them. They still, the mudlarkers that do the you know, they'd sift through the sand and the dirt.
I want to do that.
I want to do it too.
I want to do that. Let's go.
I'm in. I would love it. Like, can you imagine like getting this thing and then you're like,
I know.
You pull it out.
Yeah, sorry. I would love it. I would love it. Wow. Couple things I'll show because I printed them off and I thought they were interesting. Whenever Dutch Chintz was being reproduced in Holland, in the Netherlands, it's just a piece of artwork of these girls hand painting.
How cool.
I thought that was really cool. And their little outfit and her little cap, which is very different, and her little chintz. I don't know.
I wonder what the story is. There's so many little girls there. Do you think that was a school or an orphanage?
I'm wondering if it was an orphanage or a school. I really don't know. I mean, you know, just curiosity. I looked it and printed it off and didn't do a ton of research on it, but I thought it was neat.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Kind of fun. And then I did read something else that there was towards the end of the chintz craze, England especially was thrilled to put as much chintz as they could on the boats heading to America and just get rid of it. They wanted it out of their country. They were happy to send it to America. So I have this quilt that has just odd little chunks. This is from the 1830s of chintz. I don't think, I looked through it. I don't think any of it is Dutch chintz, but I'm sure some of it is French.
Do you feel like that chintz, can you see if it's got the sheen or the polish?
No, I can't feel any glazing on it at all.
Okay.
And I don't know if that, now I did read something that the glazing in India was done, sometimes they would overglaze it with a shell. They would take a shell and just rub. I mean, this was so labor intensive, this fabric. I mean, it was incredible. And so, and then at some point in Europe, and I'm not sure where, there was actually an egg wash applied to the fabric. So that was another technique used to get that shine. But I don't know if that washed out. You can see there's some damage here, like some of these fabrics ate away. So I mostly got this just because the fabrics, and I wanted to be able to study them. But
look at how cool.
Aren't they beautiful?
So you're not really sure. You're not really sure where the fabrics came from. They were. It's
it's like grandma's scrap bag. Yeah, grandma's scrap bag. Whoever made this quilt, this likely some of these were clothing items. Actually, probably all of these were clothing items or remnants from cutting out clothing. And so, they would just use everything and piece it together to make the quilt. And so this was purchased from a dealer in America, but I'm sure some of these fabrics are European. It's just, it's just very interesting.
Well, and when you see the fabrics that have like the Rococo influence or the geometrics, that's, definitely European, right? When you see that, and the Indian fabrics are so distinctive.
They are so distinctive. And the
even though the Indian, craftspeople, they made the fabric specifically for the European market, so it would look like the Europeans would send over, okay, listen, I want this print,
right,
but made in chintz, so they would make it for that market and then send it back.
Did I show this one already? Here's an Indian chintz.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Is that like a wall hanging?
That's an antique coverlet. It's from 1725 to 1750. So that's kind of that time period we're talking about.
It was just blowing up then. I mean, it was just like taking off. It was
blowing
amazing. Up. Yeah.
So, and then another really gorgeous piece I'll share. This is taken, and these two ladies have done a ton to reproduce the Dutch fabrics.
Okay, and
Moonen.
Okay, and this was oh, look at that. That is gorgeous.
Isn't that amazing? And so what I read was that, these vines were not true to nature, right? Because every flower is growing off the same vine, which would never, I don't know which way it goes, which would never happen in real life.
Right.
But, almost always the tulip, but I guess the Europeans really wanted the rose. That was one
that makes sense. That makes sense, right? Just gorgeous. Yeah, and I have oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So, and I think that was I just love the branch. I think that was the European too. They wanted the lighter ground, which was harder to get.
I remember you saying that. And so you were saying they had a huge process of bleaching the background.
Right. That's what they were saying, is that to get that lighter background, they had to go through more steps and go through more bleaching. And here's a dress. Let me see if I can get that up on my thing. So this one, okay, it's going to load here. So this dress is the lighter ground, and this is actually, I don't know if you can see it, but that is from the later part of the 18th century, so you can see how narrow the pleats are, and it's just got a softer silhouette, very plain, and very, very, it looks like you were saying, the branches or the vines going out, and it almost looks like a painted piece.
It really does.
Yeah, beautiful. And then some of the chintz was made specifically for skirts, so you can see it's got like a border at the bottom.
Beautiful.
And one of the examples I saw, it was almost looked like sampler fabric. It had this hunting scene on the whole border on the bottom, so it had these men with guns and dogs and all of that. So.
I guess style and fashion, you know, it just always goes with what's, you know, people are feeding off of what's going on around them, and they see a painting or a wallpaper and they adapt it into a sampler or a fabric, and it's all influenced by each other. So
yeah, everything it piggybacks, right? It goes through everything does that. It's love it.
Thank you for taking time away from your stitching to chat.
It was so much fun. I always love to talk to you.
I love talking to you too. And you know, you are such a wealth of knowledge. We just might have to find another topic that that we can talk about and do this again, because I had a blast.
Oh, me too. I love it. The whole process.
Thank you for dressing up.
Thank you for, well, that's my pleasure. And thank you for, you know, sending me into this chintz deep dive. And so now, we'll see what I come up with.
I can't wait. I'll look forward to seeing your outfit.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. You too.
Bye, Katherine.
So I'd like to show you some of the quilts that I've made over the years using chintz. They're not necessarily Dutch chintz. In fact, I don't think any of these have Dutch chintz. I have one downstairs that I think I'm going to try to pop in with the video with Katherine that uses Dutch chintz, but these use American and English and French general. A lot of it's French general, French chintz. So I'm going to try to do a bed turning by myself. And a bed turning is basically something that was done at quilt shows in the early part of the century and is still done today. A lot of quilt shows feature antique quilts this way, where they layer the bed with quilts and then pull one back at a time so you can see what's underneath. And so I'm going to try to do that myself with these quilts and tell you a little bit about them, but mostly so you can see the fabrics and some of the chintz fabrics and how they've been used. And these are excuse me, these are quilts that have been reproduced from antiques or adapted from antiques. So enjoy. This first little quilt has a chintz center medallion that was part of Moda. A Moda design, a Moda fabric, and the quilt was designed by Betsy Chuchin, and it's in her book, Quilts for All Seasons. If you're interested in making it, and it's a small quilt. It's meant to be a wall hanging or just a lap quilt, and it uses a lot of chintz and a lot of other fabrics, and it's very blended and busy, and just pretty typical of this time period. The next one has this gorgeous column print that was reproduced by Di Ford, and a lot of chintz fabrics are in the flying geese, which are this block here. And it's a very simple design, just columns, but it's a good way to use fabrics, and it's pretty typical of that 1800 time period that I love. And it was, I believe this was an in the beginning design from their blended quilt series. I don't have the pattern, I don't have the book. But just some fun. It's a fun way to use a lot of chintz fabrics, or large scale and small scale and medium scale fabrics just chopped up. Okay, and under that, see if I can do this. Oh, this is interesting. I have this quilt. Now this quilt doesn't have a lot of chintz in the quilt itself, in the body of the quilt, but the border is this gorgeous bird chintz that was reproduced by Joe Morton years ago. Let's see if I can get it better. And this one's hand quilted. All right, and under this, I have another quilt that was designed by Di Ford. It's called Jane's Garden. I did not do the center applique that was required. It ends up having, oh, it's a lot of pink, but it looks great in my guest room. And it's from her book, Primarily Quilts Too. But it has just really simple 9-patch with a border and then across. And it's really, like she says, it's all about the fabric. That's part of the title of the book. And it really is all about the fabric. So I've got some large scale chintz chopped up. Got small scale prints. This was a large scale. This was actually a blackbird print. Okay, and then under that I have a quilt called Bond Street, and it was a pattern drafted by Karen Stiles, and you can see it's kind of like the Jane Austen quilt, but it's got French chintz, a lot of French general. That's an old fabric. It's got some Di Ford, got some toile, and again that gorgeous pheasant border. So this again is kind of all about the fabric. This one's not quilted yet. This is just a top, so you can see that. Under that is another one by Betsy Chuchin, and it's very simple. It's just half square triangles, and it's just all about the placement, but it's full of chintz and fabrics with movement, and just all kinds of colors and prints. Let's see if I can get up here and get a better look at it. And really, these quilts are all about the fabric. Let's see a gorgeous chintz. And that is also in her book that I showed you a few minutes ago. And that's it. Oh, the back of this one's kind of fun. I used a piece of Di Ford chintz and then some other fabric and just scrapped it up kind of, you know, like you see on the back of a lot of antique quilts.
I hope you found that interesting. I sure had fun. Catherine's great to chat with, and that's one of the joys of being a part of FlossTube, is getting to know other stitchers and you know, we have the same passion for stitching, but we also have other interests, and they kind of overlap and interconnect. And so thanks for joining me today. I do have the winner of my Floss-a-versary giveaway, and it's going to be a box of stitching, quilting goodies that is going to be sent to Christy Scooch, S-C-H-O-C-H. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Christy Scooch or Christy Scooch. So Christy, get in touch with me on my email or private message me through Instagram and give me your address so I can mail this to you and you can have fun and help me celebrate this 1-year adventure. And then I also have a giveaway in honor of this episode on chintz for this gorgeous pattern. If you're not a quilter, you may want to get this and jump in the waters of quilting, but if you definitely aren't going to make, you know, want to use it, please don't enter. I will have other entries for stitching cross-stitch items in the future. This is a gorgeous quilt designed by Karen Stiles, very much in honor of the time period that we've been talking about. So it's called Bond Street. It's definitely, you could use any fabric. You don't have to use chintz. You don't have to use reproduction. You can use modern. You can do solids. You can do whatever you want. Anyway, it's a gorgeous pattern, and so for that one, let's just say chintz, C-H-I-N-T-Z, and you can see that she used several in there. So, all right, as always, make time for stitching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.